thanks for tuning in. I'm Ant, this is BT. The purpose of our show is to give a black perspective towards controversial and uncomfortable subjects. Unapologetic is a safe space for us and our viewers to have those difficult conversations. BT, how you feeling this week, man?
Not bad. You know, coming to the end of the year, you know, I'm just ready for 2021, man. I'm telling you, it's been kicking our you know what, and you know, there's more opportunity ahead and more podcasts to come, so y'all gonna have to stick with us and
right.
You know, handle us for a little bit longer at least. So.
No, I feel that 100%. I mean, I look at it as opportunity every day, but yeah, we're gonna take this day and make opportunity out of it right here with this topic that we got going today. So today's topic that we're going to be discussing is actually diversity and inclusion. So right out the back, I'm gonna just go straight into it with you. Do you feel diversity and inclusion is necessary in society in general?
I do, to an extent. So let me elaborate and get into that. Right. So I do think that there are different and multiple definitions and ways people take diversity and inclusion, right? There's also different segments and areas that are important for diversity and inclusion. So when we're speaking about affirmative action or a scholarly piece, right, I do think that it's very necessary to at least give everybody the same opportunity, you know, no matter what the pigment of their skin is, right, or the area that they brought in, or their financial status or background. So programs like affirmative action for universities, chance programs, you know, black student unions, things of that nature. I think that's completely necessary for blacks and minorities, Latinos, everything like that, to resonate and have an outlet for them in that scope, in that space. You know, to uplift each other, and for the university to have the ability to look down on those groups, not down, but look towards those groups, and lean on them as resources to uplift them as well, right? And that's from a scholarly standpoint. Diversity and inclusion in a workspace is necessary to an extent, but I do think that it needs to have its limitations to it. Because my thing is, it hits a point when you're speaking about it in a corporate or just a workplace segment in general. I think diversity and inclusion hits a point where you teeter that line of what are your true intentions behind doing it. And I think that at times some of these companies and corporations that you're working for, they're pushing diversity for the wrong reasons. They're pushing it because they think it's the right thing to do. It's what they have to do, and it just looks good to their stakeholders, the owners, CEOs, things of that nature, and it looks good to the general eye because all that stuff is usually public information, right? And a lot of these times, these CEOs, owners, executives, they're white, and those committee owners, board member holders are white, and they are cognizant of it, and they know it, but they're doing it for the wrong reasons, right? I think that when you're speaking of diversity and inclusion and you're hiring black people just to hire black people, I think that's where we get into the weeds. Because especially from a qualification standpoint, I don't think it's necessarily right or reasonable for you to go out and hire somebody that has significantly less experience because they're black, but there's somebody that's more qualified or overly qualified for the role, and just giving that out to hit a quota. You're giving that opportunity to hit a quota. Or in instances, I've actually worked for a company before that actually gave out incentives to recruit and refer black people to the company. Now, in that sense, what does that start to spur? What does that start to, you know, create for you? Because now, what I'm thinking in the back of my head is you have a generalized white people or others in a company that are starting to look and target black people for the wrong reasons, for paychecks, for to look good from your HR standpoint. You're doing it for your own beneficiary, but you're not actually doing it for the uplifting and the equal opportunity channel that we're trying to do. So in my opinion, there's a difference between diversity and inclusion and just diversity quotas. I think that's where we get into the weeds, and I think that's where it starts to lose its merit. And it also can harm a business because you're trying to put a lot of effort into hiring these certain ethnicities, genders. Oh wow, ethnicities, genders, and things of that nature, right? But at the same time, you might be hurting the quality of your work because there might be a lot of people that have been interviewed through that process that are significantly more qualified. They can add more value to that job, but they don't because they're too fresh, they're too new, they're not. It's not the right time for that role, but they're minority. So. Or they're the opposite gender, or they're LGBTQ, things of that nature. So that's my stance on it.
Okay. Yeah, so I hear you, and I'm gonna be frank with you, I disagree with you. So I know you said you agree with a portion of it. Me, I wholeheartedly agree that it is a necessary in general. I think a great metaphor would be, someone that is very wealthy or well off donating to a cause, maybe for a tax write-off. Now, is their intent good? No, probably not. But is the outcome needed? Is it received well? Does someone appreciate whoever's receiving it regardless of the intent? Most likely, especially if it's an impoverished or, battered women, children without any type of food, or homeless, whatever the case may be, they still need what that is. So I say that as a metaphor just to say, I feel like we're talking about intent versus the actual outcome of it. Intent may not always be pure, which is why diversity and inclusion, like that whole term, that phrase, however you want to break it down, was even originated, is because there wasn't fair and equal opportunity amongst minority subgroups. I'm not going to just pigeonhole black people because I think it's just minorities in general. There was not fair and equal opportunity. Therefore, this was forced to come about. These type of different initiatives and programs within companies or even within schools, they were forced to do this because they weren't already on their own being genuine and giving opportunity to those who did not have that fair opportunity or just equal representation when them or people that look like them make up a good portion of the body of whether it be workers or people within the school, so on and so forth. So I say that to say that the reason that they are forced to do it is because they weren't willing to do it. And if they aren't willing to do it, then we would have regressed a long time ago and we wouldn't be where we're at today, speaking from a minority perspective as far as being diversified in the workplace and just being included on things that we weren't already included in. So I think it's one of those things where it's a quote unquote necessary evil. Do I want it to be that way? No, I prefer if it was all genuine and people did it out of the kindness of their heart because they know it's the right and ethical thing to do. But that's not the reality of this world. That's not the way it's trending. So therefore, there are these different initiatives that have to be in place so that we, just as minorities in general, have a fair representation and a fair opportunity in areas that we wouldn't have otherwise.
I hear you on that. But I think my biggest cry about that is, like you said, I know you're speaking to intent, but when you speak about, the donation piece of it, right, that's from an individualistic standpoint. That person might not have the best intentions. But when we're talking about a whole company, and I'm talking about more or less the larger corporations and companies, right? When you're talking about a whole company creating this mindset that we need to hit these numbers, we need to hit these goals because it looks good, that the organic nature behind that, it just doesn't sit right with me whatsoever. And when you're hiring, minorities and trying to target minorities when you're coming to the recruitment process, how do you do that? Because when you're doing it, you're just going through Indeed, you're doing phone interviews and things of that nature before they get in there. How do they get to that past those first couple of stages based off of just merit, right? And what you're looking at for how they sound on the phone, how can they speak, how can they, present themselves, how do they project, do they sound knowledgeable, things of that nature, right? Those are things that should be taken consideration regardless of skin color or whatever that fact of the matter is. My issue is when you start to do generalizations or you go to their LinkedIn and you see, oh, okay, they're black, let's bring them in for an interview. Or you see Khadijah Brown or something like that, a name that just looks like it fits a specific race, genome, things of that nature, then you want to bring them in just for the sake of it, for the numbers, right? And even at times, it's not the hiring, it's just interviewing a certain amount of people, right? And I think that it brings a light to the wrong reasonings of it. Now, when I speak to inclusion, obviously, organically, you should be hiring diversity. I'm not saying that. And I think that blacks, gays, females, things of that nature should all be considered equal on the same scale when it comes to a hiring or interviewing process. But then once you get internal with the company, I think inclusion is important from having self minority or subgroup organizations within those companies. The company that I work at, they have like a black empowerment organization. They have an Asian empowerment organization. LGBTQ, things of that nature. I think that helps to promote a diverse nature and a diverse culture within your company. I think things like that are very important. Don't get me wrong. But when we're talking about hiring based off of merit and based off of what they can bring to the table, I think that should be taken into consideration just as equal as what, or a little bit more than what their race is actually, because at the end of the day, the color of their skin ain't doing the job. They're the ones that's doing the job. Now, we're talking about opportunity. That makes sense. In my honest opinion, I do think that when it comes to being a little bit more laxed and giving, a diversity chances of opportunity at jobs, more or less to start on the medium-sized business to smaller-sized business scale, or even internship scales and things of that nature, so that they can get their craft down, they can start to learn and have these skills that are tangible, that when you get to the workforce and you start interviewing for these larger roles, it's like, okay, this guy's black, this guy's white. Let's hire and fight for diversity, but he can also do the same exact thing that the white guy can do, right? So it's if you're prioritizing it on that basis, it's like, hey, he's gonna bring a good diversity to our culture and and different opinions and backgrounds to our company, but he also can knock the job out of the park. And I think that's where my dissonance is when we're starting to hire based off of color more than merit.
I hear you, but I think something you need to take into consideration. I don't think anyone is saying like, hey, he's black, don't even look at his resume, or she's a female, or she's gay, or any type of minority base. Hey, just look at them. All right, get them in there. All right. Obviously, there has to be some core competencies that you have to qualify for. Now, and I do believe, I'm gonna say it straight up, if there's a minority and then there's for example, a white male, have to have the same core competencies or even just similar. The white male can have a little bit more on their resume. I do think that minority should get that option. You get the preferential treatment as far as being chosen, because I think that specifically white males are the most overrepresented race, individual type, subgroup, however you want to preference it, in our country, in every area of our country, from business to government to schools. They're overrepresented heavily. Mm-hmm. Whereas there are plenty of minorities that are underrepresented by a drastic margin. And something you have to take into consideration is merits may not always be equal, but why is that? Now you have to go back to the root of the issue as far as where did they originate from? Did the minority originate from an area that was maybe impoverished or maybe low to median income, and they didn't have the most recent textbooks, or they didn't have the same options to go join programs and whatnot that would allow you to network and build and learn about how to utilize resources, so on and so forth, to put yourself in a better position to have the same merit and credentials and accolades to compete against someone that is overpopulated, such as a white male in this country, in any industry. So I think it's a necessary evil, once again, because we're trying to bridge a gap. Now, this gap originated centuries ago, going all the way back to like slavery days and women not having a right to vote and things along those lines, and just, the LGBTQ community not having any rights at all, so on and so forth, and slowly but surely bridging that gap. Right. And we need these type of initiatives so that we can further bridge that gap, because this is centuries of damage put in place. So it's only going to take minimum that long to try to bridge that gap to make it towards an equal playing field. But right now, we're so underrepresented as minorities that you don't have a fair shot. White males clearly have preferential treatment when it comes to being chosen for different jobs or opportunities or programs or leading initiatives, so on and so forth. So these things are necessary to give us a fighting chance, because there's a lot of people out there that run these companies that they're not playing on an equal playing field. They're not playing fair. They're not being the most ethical that they can be when it comes to hiring. Some people do have bias. Some people do have bigotry. Like it exists. So we need these type of things to give us a chance, get our foot in the door, because to your point that your company right now has Asian programs, black programs, so on and so forth. they wouldn't have the opportunity if there wasn't a program initially to even get, you have to start with one at some point.
That's fair.
And eventually you start to get a collective to where you can form these programs and start to bring these new, fresh, different ideas and backgrounds and perspectives to the table, which in turn can generate more revenue for the business, which is the overarching goal for any business. At the end of the day, it's about the bottom line. What revenue, net income, what does that look like? So I think that's a huge thing that should be taken into consideration.
Yeah, and I agree with you on most of that. And I just think the biggest thing, or the biggest halter I have, is the rabbit hole that it could go down when you're talking about basically recruiting, right, for those specific needs. And then you're recruiting for the wrong reasons, and then you start to pigeonhole, with quotas and referral bonuses and stuff like that. Like I said, it just doesn't sit right with me. But like you said, if you don't have those programs in place, it won't bridge the necessary gaps that you need between different organizations, which is why I completely agree with the internal groups. But I also do think that there's a piece of it, like you said, that is engraved in our society from time to time before, from education to resources to opportunities to network and things of that nature. But I do think that's organic from our socioeconomic classes. Now, I don't think that, and there's at times, obviously, but I think at some times there's just more of them, more educated. When I say educated, I mean college degree. More college degree white men that have networks within these corporate business scales, right? There's more to choose from. Their graduation rate is a lot higher.
And why is that, though? That's the thing behind
Correct.
it. Why?
Correct. Right.
It's not because they're naturally born smarter than any minority subgroup. It's because of the environment that they were born in or moved into.
Or finances.
Or finances, whatever the case may be, to where they have access to certain resources and information and instructors that other minority subgroups don't have. Correct. So that's something important to know. It's not just because you're naturally born like
right. that. Yeah, and I completely agree. But at the same time, what are those companies supposed to do about that? Those companies have to take what they're given at face value. They can't spend their time spinning wheels and looking for the highest ranked minority candidate that just doesn't really meet their needs for that role or position, right? At a time, you only can take what you have at the point. But so I do get it.
I hear you say face value, and face value usually speaks to, I feel like you were referencing in a sense like, all right, this is what we have now, but there's also such thing as foresight. And when I say foresight, I mean in the sense like, hey, this guy might not be, this guy, gal, or, gay person may not be what I'm looking for right now, but what is this potential like? What can this become down the road? Mm-hmm. Not only that, how could hiring this person affect potential hires in the future of other minority subgroups? Because I've worked at companies where there was no one that looked like me. And to be honest with you, that was deflating. Because I didn't see anyone in leadership and high up leadership or just manager roles that looked like me. It's like,
right.
What real opportunity do I have to succeed here? Not only that, being relatable. A lot of times that comes from being within the same community as another subgroup. You guys in the same community, you naturally relate to different, being able to just something as simple as just how you speak to one another, it can be slightly different than someone else that is not within that same subgroup. Having that foresight can have a huge trickle-down effect as far as long-term revenue and success within your business. So I think you need to be able to look more than just what do you have right now. Because right now, speaking in the scenario we're talking about, having a white male, you see all his credentials, like, all right, he's had all the proper instruction, experience, so on and so forth, and this is what he is now. Now take that same, take a minority on the other hand, and they don't have all of that, but they have something, and look at where they're at now. All right, so now what? We give them a little training and experience. Now what can they become? Because they have barely tapped in their potential because they haven't had all the access and resources as, for example, a white male may have had typically growing up. So being able to look at that potential and have that foresight can lead to tremendous long-term success for a business, in my viewpoint.
And I agree with that, but I also do think that at a certain point, it's a risk. And we're talking about business from a business perspective. There are companies that have the ability to take those risks for more or less a long-term project, right? Because when you talk about foresight, there's a little bit of baby stepping, hand-holding that you'll have to do on the way to get them up to scale and teach them and train them how to use what they didn't have access and availability to before, right? Certain companies like Disney and Google and those larger companies, they expect you to hit the ground rolling with those type of experiences. Now, there are people that don't have access to the best schooling, the best technology and stuff like that have hand taught themselves trained themselves, they have learned very valuable experience and have great breadth of works for what they can do from that. Now, I'm not speaking about those people, but I'm talking about people that just have the eagerness or the gusto that they want to go tackle stuff, and they're highly motivated, and there's nothing wrong with hiring people that are highly motivated. I'm just saying that has to be a starting point, because if you don't have that background, that merit, the face value that it does to be competent in that role, that's where we get into muddy waters. So, so I definitely agree with you.
One area I think we agree on, like, there does need to be a level of credibility there.
Correct.
Whether they be experienced, or whatever the case may be. There does need to be a level of credibility there, but I'm saying once that level of credibility has been established, when they reach that threshold, and even if it doesn't match up to the other, for example, once again, a white male that's typically overrepresented, I prefer to go with the minority, depending on how your company is shaped out right now as far as the breakdown. I prefer to go to minority. We're underrepresented in the area. I'm going to go with this potential and see how it turns out. And, part of any company is having some type of manager or leader, and their job typically is to cultivate and grow their personnel that are under them.
Yeah.
So that is your job. So do your job. I found you someone that has raw potential in the minority subgroup. We're trying to start to represent those people more because they are a part of our community. Do your job, grow, cultivate these people to be a productive member of this business so we can continue to generate even more revenue and have long-term success.
Yep. I agree with you. Yeah. Inclusion is definitely important. I'm glad we touched on it. We might not see eye to eye on every component of it, but the overarching thing, like you said, is credibility, and we do think that there needs to be inclusion. But there's just different forms of it and how you go about it. So appreciate you providing your perspective, because at times I don't necessarily think down that avenue. So
Same.
Do want to remind everybody though, we do have our charity of the month. And we have our Small Business of the Month, Charity of the Month, People's Coalition of Aurora. Please go check out the link in our bio. Donate to their jail bond fund for people that are arrested for petty crimes and low merit crimes. Also, Small Business of the Month, I Desire, Eyelashes and Eyewear. Great company, sister of Mr. Anthony McClinton over here. So you guys got to show some love for her. We appreciate that. And that's all I got.
Yeah, most definitely. Big shout out to Sharonda for the People's Coalition. Keep doing your thing. It's a great initiative that you took upon yourself. And of course, big shout out to my big sis for being a CEO, a businesswoman, and continue to pave the way and be a great example for other black women and other minorities out there. Aside from that, we're going to go right into our challenge of the week. So this week's challenge is going to be take a look at your current employer's diversity inclusion program and see what it consists of. If there's no program or any type of actionable items that you've seen that they've done as far as initiatives are concerned to be as inclusive as possible, then that should speak volumes to you about the company you're working for. And at that point, you need to determine is that something that you're willing to live with, you're okay with, or is that something that you want to see changed? Other than that, thanks for tuning in. As always, we appreciate it. Please like, comment, and subscribe. We would love to hear your thoughts as always. Spread love. It's contagious. God bless.
Sure.